Find a comfortable position. Allow your body to settle fully into the place where you are resting tonight. Let the surface beneath you carry your weight without effort. There is nothing that needs your attention now, nothing waiting to be finished, nothing that must be decided before sleep arrives. Simply allow the day to loosen its hold. Your breathing can move at its own quiet pace. Air drifting in, air drifting out again. With every slow breath, the body grows heavier, the muscles softening as the night deepens gently around you. Tonight's story moves slowly. There is no urgency inside it, only careful work carried out in a quiet place, one small task following another. As the movements unfold, your thoughts can drift along with them. Nothing to solve, nothing to remember, only the steady rhythm of hands at work. Tonight's story is called The Knight's Valet Preparing the Armor. The armory lies deep within the castle walls, where thick stone keeps the air cool long after the warmth of the day has faded. You walk the final stretch of corridor with a small lamp held carefully before you. Its glow moves across the floor as you go, brushing the rough edges of the stone before settling briefly against the heavy door waiting at the end of the passage. You stop there for a moment, not out of hesitation, simply from long habit. Your free hand rests against the oak surface, feeling the familiar grain beneath your fingers. The door yields slowly beneath the quiet pressure of your palm, swinging inward with a low wooden murmur. The light enters first. It spreads softly across the interior of the armory before you step over the threshold. Rows of wooden stands rise from the floor along the walls. Each one holds a resting shape of steel. Curved plates, rounded helms, articulated gloves waiting where they were placed earlier in the evening. Nothing moves. The chamber holds the stillness that settles naturally over rooms made for careful work. You step inside and ease the door closed behind you. The latch settles with a soft click. The small pool of light travels with you as you cross the room. Ahead stands the preparation table, a broad slab of oak worn smooth by years of quiet use. Its surface waits beneath the dim glow. You set the lamp near the edge of the table. The small flame steadies inside the glass. Soft illumination spreads outward, touching the cloth folded neatly at the center of the work surface, gliding over the wooden grain, and resting against the nearby wall. For a moment, you remain where you are, hands resting lightly on the edge of the table. The wood feels cool and solid beneath your palms. Around you, the armory remains silent. Helmets rest on their pegs. Breastplates hang patiently from their stands. Leather straps lie still against the darker shapes of the racks. Everything waits in ordered readiness. Your hand slides slowly across the surface of the table, clearing the faint trace of dust left by the passing day. The oak grows smooth beneath the light movement of your palms. The cloth waits ready for the first piece of armor. The work always begins like this, in stillness, in patience, with the calm preparation of the place where the tasks of the night will unfold. You remain beside the work surface for a moment longer. The small flame burns steadily within the glass lamp, its gentle brightness settling across the room without haste. Soft reflections rest along the curved shapes of steel arranged on their stands, each piece waiting in the same calm order in which it was placed there earlier in the evening. You lift your hands from the edge of the table and take a slow step across the chamber. The stone beneath your boots holds a cool firmness, worn smooth in places where many quiet crossings have passed before yours. The nearest stand waits a few steps away. A breastplate rests upon it, the curved steel held upright by the wooden frame behind it. The metal shows a faint sheen where it has been well cared for over time, though a thin layer of dust has settled lightly along its surface during the long hours of the day. You pause beside it. The glow from the lamp reaches the plate only faintly here, leaving the deeper curves in gentle shadow, while the raised ridge along its center catches a narrow line of brightness. Your fingers hover just above the steel without touching it yet. There will be time for that soon. Instead, you allow your gaze to move slowly across the rest of the armor arranged along the wall. Helms sit above their matching plates, their rounded crowns tilted slightly forward as they rest on their pegs. Articulated gloves hang beneath them, the overlapping finger plates forming quiet rows of metal that resemble folded hands. Each piece waits in silence. Nothing here asks to be hurried. Along the far wall, a row of tools hangs neatly from iron hooks set into the stone. Soft brushes, folded cloths, small bottles sealed with cork. Each item has been returned to its place after the previous night's work was done. You turn back toward the center of the room. The table waits beneath the glow of the lamp, its wide wooden surface now cleared and ready. At its center rests the folded cloth you noticed earlier. The fabric lies quietly against the oak, thick enough to soften the sound of steel when the armor pieces are lowered onto it. You walk back across the floor. The light shifts with you, sliding across the wood as you approach. When you reach the table again, you rest your fingertips lightly against the cloth. The linen feels cool beneath your touch. Soon it will be opened and spread wide across the work surface. Soon the armor will be brought forward piece by piece. But the preparation always begins with these small pauses. A quiet look across the room, a slow return to the table, the calm readiness of hands before the first task begins. Your fingers rest lightly on the folded linen. The fabric holds its shape where it lies at the center of the work surface, its edges carefully aligned from the last time it was placed here. You slide both hands beneath the upper fold and lift it gently. The cloth rises easily, soft, and heavy at once. As it lifts, the first fold loosens and falls open between your hands. You raise it slightly higher so the glow from the lamp reaches across the fabric. The pale linen catches the light in a muted way, the woven threads forming a fine pattern visible only when the cloth is held close. Another fold releases. The material lengthens, opening slowly as your hands move apart. You lower one side onto the oak. The fabric settles softly against the wood. For a moment it rests there in loose shapes, the edges not yet spread across the full surface. Your hands move again, guiding the linen outward. The cloth glides easily across the table as you draw it toward the far edge. One corner reaches the side of the work surface and stops there, hanging just slightly over the rim. You shift your hands along the material and smooth it gently. The small folds flatten beneath your palms. The linen grows still. A faint warmth from the lamp touches the surface now, turning the pale cloth into a soft pool of brightness against the darker wood beneath. You walk slowly around the side of the table. From this angle, you can see where the fabric gathers slightly along the center. Your hand moves across it once more. The linen slides outward in a slow, steady motion until the entire sheet lies evenly across the work surface. The edges rest close to the sides of the table. No corners curl upward. No folds remain. You press your palm lightly across the cloth, feeling the thickness beneath your hand. The padding it provides will soften the contact of steel when the armor pieces are lowered here later in the evening. For a moment, your hand remains there. The linen feels firm and steady beneath your palm. The table is ready now. The space where the work will take place has been prepared with care. Across the room, the quiet shapes of armor still wait upon their stands, unchanged in their patient stillness. Soon they will be lifted down one by one. But first, the rest of the tools must be brought forward, and the rhythm of the night must be properly begun. The cloth lies smooth beneath the glow of the lamp, the work surface prepared for the careful tasks that will follow. You move a little along the edge of the table and glance toward the wall where the tools are kept. Several items hang there in their usual order, each resting on its own iron hook set into the stone. soft brushes, folded cloths, small bottles, all return to their places after the last evening's work was done. You step closer. The brush is the first thing you reach for. Its wooden handle fits easily in your hand, worn smooth by many nights of careful use. The bristles form a gentle curve at the tip, soft enough to sweep away dust without marking the steel surfaces that will soon rest on the linen. You carry it back to the workbench. The brush is placed near the center of the cloth, the handle angled slightly, so it can be lifted easily when the cleaning begins. Your hand returns to the wall. A narrow glass bottle rests on the next hook. Inside, it is a small measure of oil used to keep the moving parts of the armor working smoothly. You lift it carefully. The liquid inside shifts softly as the bottle changes hands, catching a faint glimmer when you turn back toward the table. You set the bottle beside the brush, leaving a little space between them, so neither will be disturbed when the work begins. One more cloth hangs nearby. This one is finer than the thick linen spread across the table. Its weave is softer, meant for polishing rather than padding. You lift it from its hook and carry it over as well. For a moment, you hold the folded square between your fingers, feeling the smoothness of the fabric before laying it down on the prepared surface. Three tools now rest in readiness. The brush waits closest to the center. The small bottle stands just beyond it. The polishing cloth lies folded neatly to one side. You make a small adjustment, sliding the brush a little closer to the middle of the cloth so it sits within easy reach. Your hand withdraws again. Everything is now arranged for the next stage of the evening's work. Across the room, the armor pieces still rest upon their stands, unchanged in their silent patience. Soon they will be brought forward one by one. For now, the tools sit ready, the cloth lies smooth, and the workbench waits beneath the warm glow of the lamp. You remain beside the bench for a moment, looking over the small arrangement of tools now resting on the linen. The brush lies closest to the center. Behind it stands the narrow bottle. The folded polishing cloth waits to one side. Everything sits within easy reach. Your hand moves toward the lamp. The glass feels faintly warm beneath your fingers as you lift it carefully from the corner of the bench. The small flame inside sways slightly as the lamp rises. You hold it a little higher and move it toward the center of the table. The glow spreads farther now, settling across the cloth and reaching more evenly over the tools. Soft reflections form along the bristles of the brush. A thin line of brightness touches the glass bottle before sliding across the smooth weave of the folded cloth. You lower the lamp again, setting it near the back edge of the bench where the light can fall across the entire working area without casting deep shadows over the surface. The flame steadies once more. Your hand lingers briefly on the handle before releasing it. For a moment, you watch the quiet glow settle across the linen. The work surface is now fully lit. Nothing lies hidden in shadow. The brush can be seen clearly. The small bottle stands upright beside it. The polishing cloth rests neatly folded, waiting to be opened later. Satisfied with the placement, you step away from the bench. Your attention turns toward the nearest stand along the wall. The breastplate rests there, supported by the wooden frame behind it. The curved steel holds a faint reflection along its central ridge where the light reaches it. You walk toward it slowly. Each step carries you closer to the first piece that will be brought down for cleaning. The chamber remains quiet around you. Behind you, the bench waits with its tools arranged in order. Ahead, the armor stands in patient stillness, ready for the careful work that will soon begin. You stop beside the stand and look over the armor resting there. The breastplate hangs at chest height on its wooden support, its curved surface shaped to fit the body of the knight who will wear it at first light. The steel has grown cool in the quiet air of the chamber, and the faint sheen along its surface shows where it was last polished. Your hands move toward it slowly. The edges of the plate are firm beneath your fingers as you take hold of it. The metal feels smooth where the cloth has passed across it before, though a fine layer of dust now rests lightly along the raised ridge that runs down its center. You lift the plate free from its support. Its weight settles evenly into your hands. For a moment, you hold it there, feeling the balance of the steel before turning toward the bench. The chamber remains still as you carry it across the floor. The prepared surface waits beneath the glow of the lamp, the linen lying smooth and ready to receive the first piece of armor. You reach the bench and lower the plate carefully. The steel touches the cloth with a soft, muted contact. The padded linen absorbs the weight, leaving only the quiet presence of the armor resting where you set it. You adjust its position slightly. The curved shape now lies with the front facing upward, the central ridge running from top to bottom across the cloth. Your fingers move along the edge, guiding the plate until it sits evenly in the center of the working space. The breastplate rests there in silence. For a moment, you keep your hands lightly against the sides. The steel no longer belongs to the stand by the wall. It belongs now to the order of the bench, where each piece will come forward in turn and receive the same careful attention. The broad curve of the plate catches the lamp glow more fully here than it did on its stand. A muted line of brightness rests along the raised ridge. Shallower reflections gather along the outward sweep of the chest. Dust remains visible in a few places, most noticeably where the ridge narrows and where the metal meets the riveted edges. That is all as expected. Armor waiting through the day always gathers a little of the room upon it, a trace of dust, a dimming of shine, a slight dullness where the light no longer moves as clearly across the steel. Nothing serious, nothing difficult to restore, only the ordinary signs that call the valet back to the workbench each evening. You straighten slowly. Behind you, the stand now stands empty of the piece it carried. Along the wall, the remaining shapes of armor still wait in their places. Helm above, gauntlets beneath, other pieces still held in readiness for their turn. But the first part of the work has begun now. The breastplate lies ready on the linen. The tools stand within reach. The lamp burns steadily above the table, and the night's careful preparation has properly started. The first piece has been brought down. That alone is enough to alter the shape of the room, not dramatically, only in the way a single placed object can quietly gather the rest of the evening around it. The breastplate now lies where your hands can reach it without turning. The lamp has a true surface to answer. The cloth has weight upon it. The workbench is no longer waiting in the abstract. It has become specific. You remain near it long enough to feel that change settle. The raised ridge along the plate catches the light in a steadier line than it did upon the stand. One side falls into softer shade. The riveted edge holds a finer scatter of dim highlights, broken by the thin presence of dust still gathered there. Even the linen beneath the plate appears altered. Where it was smooth and empty before, it now dips almost imperceptibly under the weight of steel. There is comfort in such small exact changes, a thing brought from distance into nearness, a task no longer imagined but begun. The room itself seems to draw in around that beginning. The wall stands remain patient in their places. The tools continue to wait without fuss. A draft too faint to stir the lamp only touches the back of your hand for an instant and is gone again. Stone keeps its cool, oak keeps its grain. Steel keeps the memory of the hand that forged it. You let your breathing move within all that steadiness. No need to think ahead too quickly. Not yet of polishing, not yet of hinges, not yet of straps, garments, or sword belt. Only this: a prepared bench, a single breastplate, a lamp, and the first clear sense that the long, quiet work of the night is truly underway. Air rests cool against your face. Somewhere within the thickness of the walls, the castle carries on with its distant nightlife almost too softly to be called sound at all. A far settling of timber, a breath of air moving through an unseen passage, the faintest suggestion of weight held by old stone. None of it troubles the chamber. It only deepens the sense that this room belongs to a larger sleeping place, tucked within it like a calm pocket of care. Your gaze moves once more around the armory. Nothing has been arranged here carelessly. Each stand is placed with enough room around it for steel to be lifted without striking wood. Hooks are fixed at a height that allows tools to be reached without stretching or searching. Even the table has been set not quite in the center of the room, but a little nearer the lamp side, where light falls best across the working surface. Such things may seem small, yet much of good work depends on small decisions made long before the hand begins its task. The bench itself carries the memory of those decisions. You can see it in the wear of the oak. One side smoother where palms have often rested, one corner slightly darkened where the lamp is most often set. A faint crescent mark near the far edge where a helm was once lowered more heavily than intended many years ago, and left its small reminder in the grain. None of these marks spoil the table. They make it more itself. Your fingertips drift lightly over the cloth again, not to change its position now, only to register the prepared surface one last time before the next motions begin. The linen answers with its own quiet certainty. No drag, no looseness, no gathered fold waiting to catch against an edge of steel, just a padded plane of pale fabric across dark wood, ready to receive weight without sound. That readiness has its own soothing quality, perhaps because it asks for no flourish. Nothing in the room needs to prove anything. The steel does not glitter theatrically. The lamp does not blaze. The tools do not display themselves. Everything is modest and exact, as though the armory understands that the most reliable work is usually the least showy. Your breathing can settle into that exactness now if it wishes. No need to deepen it, no need to count it. Only let it move with the same unforced steadiness that belongs to the room. In, out, the breastplate waits on the bench. Above the empty stand, the helm still rests on its peg. Other pieces remain quietly in shadow and half-light along the wall, each with its own shape and purpose, none demanding to be taken first except by the order established through long practice. That order matters, not because the armor would somehow fail if the pieces were tended in a different sequence, but because repetition teaches the hands to loosen. When work is familiar, the body does not need to brace against it. A known order allows attention to grow softer rather than tighter. Table first. Cloth, tools, light, then steel. That is how the work always begins here. The same way many nights have opened before it. Behind you, the stand remains where it stood, now empty of the piece it carried. Other shapes of armor still wait along the wall. The helmet remains above its peg, and articulated gloves hang quietly beneath it. The rings of chainmail rest folded over a nearby support, but the first piece has now been brought forward. The steel plate lies ready on the linen, prepared for the careful cleaning that will soon begin. You reach up toward the peg above the empty stand where the helmet rests. The rounded helm sits slightly forward on its support, its curved surface catching a faint line of brightness where the glow from the lamp reaches it. A thin trace of dust lies along the ridge near the crown, settled there during the quiet hours since the armor was last returned to the room. Your hands close gently around the sides. The steel feels cool and firm beneath your fingers. For a moment, you hold it where it rests, letting the weight settle comfortably into your grip before easing it free from the peg. The helm lifts without resistance. You draw it slowly toward you, lowering it just enough to look across its surface. The curved shape reflects the soft light in a narrow band that moves as you turn it slightly. The visor remains closed. Your thumb rests briefly near the hinge, feeling the small joint where the visor pivots when opened. The metal there is smooth from use, though a faint trace of dust gathers where the hinge meets the rim. Holding the helm steadily, you turn back toward the workbench. The plate you carried earlier lies ready on the linen, its curved surface waiting beneath the quiet light. As you approach, the rounded helmet reflects the pale cloth below, a soft glow traveling across the steel as you move. You reach the bench and lower the helm carefully. The metal settles beside the breastplate with a muted contact against the linen. For a moment, your hands remain resting on the sides, guiding the position, so the visor faces upward and the crown sits evenly on the cloth. The curved surfaces of both pieces now rest side by side, one broad and protective, the other rounded and close-fitting. Together, they form the beginning of the armor that will be prepared through the night. You release your hands slowly. The helm remains where you placed it, its surface quiet and still beside the plate. Behind you, the stand now holds only the remaining pieces waiting their turn. For a moment longer, you remain beside the bench and look at the two pieces together. The breastplate lies broad across the center of the linen, its raised ridge catching the warm edge of the lamp's glow. Beside it, the helm rests lower and more rounded, its curved crown gathering the same light in a softer arc. The shapes are different, yet they already belong together. One made to shield the body, the other to enclose the head. Separate pieces now, but before long they will become part of one ordered whole. That too is part of the night's work. Not only cleaning, not only polishing, arrangement, readiness, the careful bringing together of all that must fit the knight's body by morning. A good bench arrangement carries its own kind of reassurance. It means the hand will not need to search when the next task begins. It means one piece may be lifted without troubling another. It means the eye can move naturally from broad work to finer work without interruption. You see that order forming now. The breastplate claims the center because it is the largest shape and asks first for the broadest movements. The helm rests beside it, close enough to belong to the same working field, but not so near that their edges threaten one another. There is still room beyond them for what comes next. The narrower intelligence of the gauntlets, the yielding fall of the coif, the cloths that will be folded and refolded as the night continues. You study that spacing for a moment because spacing matters. Too much room and the bench begins to feel scattered, as though each task belongs to a different evening. Too little and everything grows cramped before the work has even begun. This is neither. This is workable, readable, calm. The lamp helps with that as well. Its glow does not strike both pieces equally, and that is useful. The breastplate receives the broader light. The helm receives the more curved. Between them, the linen keeps a softer band where the eye may rest without being asked to read detail. So much of the valet's work depends on such quiet relationships. How steel sits beside steel, how cloth protects metal, how light falls, how space remains available for the hand to move without clumsiness. Perhaps that is one reason the work quiets the mind. It narrows attention to things that can actually be put right. A position altered by an inch, a crease smoothed, a hinge eased, a surface clarified. Not grand matters, only exact ones. And exactness, when it is gentle enough, can feel like rest. You let your gaze move from the plate to the helm and back again. The linen beneath them softens the contact of steel on wood. The glow from the lamp reaches both. The workbench, which only a little while ago stood empty, has begun to gather purpose. Your hands return to the helm resting on the linen. The rounded steel sits steadily beside the breastplate. its surface reflecting a soft band of light that shifts slightly as you touch it again. The metal has grown cool in the quiet air of the armory, and the smooth curve beneath your fingers feels firm and familiar. You lift the helm just enough to turn it. The shape rotates slowly between your hands. As it moves, the narrow opening of the visor comes into clearer view. The thin slit runs across the front where the knight's eyes will look out when the armor is worn. Your thumb settles near the hinge. With a careful motion, you test the movement of the visor. The metal pivots slightly where the small joint meets the rim. The motion is slow and controlled, opening just a little before returning to its resting position. The hinge moves well. Still, your fingers remain there for a moment, tracing lightly along the edge where dust has gathered in the small seam. You brush it away with a gentle pass of your fingertip. The steel beneath feels smooth again. Holding the helm steady, you tilt it once more so the light reaches along the crown. The curved surface reflects the glow in a soft arc that travels from front to back as the angle shifts. For a moment, you simply examine the shape: the crown, the visor, the strong rim that protects the lower edge. Satisfied, you lower the helm again. It returns to the linen beside the breastplate, the curved metal resting quietly where you place it. Your hands guide it into position so the visor faces upward, leaving the hinge visible and ready for the cleaning that will come later. Once the helm is settled, you withdraw your hands. The two pieces lie side by side on the cloth, one broad and protective, one rounded and enclosing, both waiting patiently for the careful work that will follow. For a moment, you do not reach for the next piece. The bench already holds enough to change the feeling of the room. What had been arranged at a distance along the wall is now gathered close. The broad front of the breastplate, the enclosing curve of the helm, their shapes answering one another across the pale linen. That gathering has a quiet gravity of its own. You step back only half a pace and let your eyes take in the arrangement from a little farther away. The breastplate anchors the center. The helm gives the composition height and curve. Between them, the lamp lays down soft boundaries of brightness, leaving the deeper undersides in gentler shade. Nothing gleams harshly. Light does not strike the steel in sharp points. It settles, it travels, it rests and moves again when the angle shifts. This softer register matters in work like this. Too much light flattens detail, too little conceals it. What the valet needs is not brilliance, but readability. Enough glow to see where dust has settled, where hinges thicken into shadow, where rivets interrupt the line of a plate, where cloth has left one surface smoother than another. That is what the lamp gives. Your hand passes lightly once more above the helm, not touching now, only tracing the air above the crown as though confirming the space each piece occupies on the bench. There is still room for the gauntlets, still room for the coif, still room for cloth, brush, oil, and the slow passage of hands between them. That room is important too. A crowded work surface creates its own noise, even in silence. Objects too close together seem to press on one another. Edges threaten to catch. Metal waits with too little breathing space around it. This bench has not yet fallen into that cramped feeling. Each piece can still be approached cleanly, from the side or from above, without awkwardness. Even that contributes to the calmer movement of the work. You turn toward the wall where the gauntlets remain. From here, they look smaller than the plate and helm, yet once lifted, they will reveal their own intricacy. A breastplate offers broad work. A helm offers curve and seam. Gauntlets offer joints. Many narrow decisions in metal, many small overlaps. Many places where the hand that made them had to imagine another hand inside them, bending, closing, gripping, releasing. Such pieces always ask for a slightly different kind of attention. Not grand, not difficult exactly, only finer, more local. The eye must narrow itself to smaller ridges and shallower spaces. Before going to them, you glance once toward the chainmail still hanging nearby. That too will change the texture of the workbench when it comes. Plate and helm bring shape. Gauntlets bring articulation. Mail brings drape. A different language of steel altogether. Not broad protective surfaces, but many linked circles that share the burden among themselves. A weight dispersed. A form without fixed form until it is lifted, spread, worn. Already the night begins to unfold in those variations. Broad, rounded, jointed, woven. Perhaps that is why armor preparation can carry such a dissolved feeling when it is done without hurry. One task slips into another not because they are identical, but because each belongs naturally beside the next. Curve leads to seam, seam leads to hinge, hinge leads to plate, plate leads to link. Link leads back to cloth, to hand, to light, to the same slow breathing in which the whole sequence is held. Your own breathing can follow that now. No need to direct it, only let it accompany the work. The lamp flame remains steady at the back of the table. Its glow touches the rim of the helm, then the ridge of the breastplate, then fades into the linen between them. Somewhere below that visible calm is the entire reason for the work, not display, not ceremony, but readiness. Morning will come, the night will rise, hands will reach for what has been set in order. Buckles will be fastened, straps drawn through leather, steel lifted and settled into place. Movement will return to all these presently still things. Tonight prevents that hour from beginning in disorder. Dust lifted now need not be noticed later. Oil placed now will spare stiffness later. Cloth smoothed now will spare fumbling later. Every careful motion in the armory removes one roughness from the coming day before it arrives. There is something deeply easing in that kind of work, not because it solves life, not because it changes the shape of the world, only because it makes one small corner of tomorrow more manageable by tending it quietly tonight. You let that thought pass through you and then drift on. No need to dwell on it. The gauntlets are waiting. The coif is waiting. The bench has room enough for them both. And the night still has a long, unbroken length ahead in which the rest of the armor may come forward piece by piece. Only then do you turn from the bench toward the hooks where the next pieces wait. The gauntlets hang beneath the empty peg, still and ready in the lamplight. The articulated gloves hang against the wooden rack, their overlapping plates forming quiet rows that resemble folded fingers. Each one has been shaped to move with the hand that will wear it, the narrow sections sliding over one another whenever the joints bend. For a moment, you look over them. The metal carries the faint, softened sheen left by the last polishing, though a light trace of dust has gathered in the small spaces between the plates during the long hours since the armor was returned to its place. Your hand reaches for the first gauntlet. The cuff feels firm beneath your fingers as you lift it from the hook. Its weight is lighter than the breastplate or helm, yet the layered plates still give it a solid presence in your hand. You hold it there briefly. The fingers hang downward, and the small metal segments shift softly against one another as the gauntlet changes position. Then you reach for the second. It lifts free just as easily, and for a moment the pair balance between your hands, their articulated fingers hanging in quiet stillness. You turn back toward the workbench. The linen surface waits beneath the glow, the breastplate and helm already resting there in calm order. As you approach, the metal plates of the gauntlets catch a narrow reflection that travels briefly across their curved surfaces. You lower the first gauntlet onto the cloth. The cuff touches down gently beside the helm, and the fingers extend slightly across the linen before the plates settle into stillness. The second follows. You place it beside the first, leaving a small space between them, so the articulated fingers can lie naturally without pressing together. For a moment, your hands remain there. You make a slight adjustment, so the cuffs sit closer to the helm, while the fingers extend toward the open space of the cloth. Now the workbench holds four pieces of the armor: the breastplate, the helm, and the two gauntlets resting side by side. You withdraw your hands slowly. Across the room, the remaining pieces still wait where they hang, ready to be brought forward as the careful work of the night continues. You turn toward the wall where the last piece still rests. A hood of chainmail hangs from its peg, the woven rings gathered together in a dense fold of interlocking steel. The pattern has held its shape through many evenings of careful use. You lift the coif gently. The links shift as the weight settles, each ring sliding against its neighbor with a soft metallic whisper. Unlike the solid plates resting on the bench, the mail bends easily, moving almost like fabric, though every thread of it is formed from steel. You carry it toward the workbench. As you walk, the rings continue their quiet movement, adjusting to the change in weight before settling again. The coif is lowered onto the linen beside the gauntlets. For a moment, it remains gathered where it rests, a loose mound of interlocking rings awaiting the next motion. You lift one section slightly. The weight gathers for an instant and then slips back onto the cloth, the rings spreading as they fall. The movement produces a faint shifting sound that fades as the links settle. Another portion is raised and released. Again, the rings slide across one another, widening the layer of mail across the linen. The weave begins to open. Small folds ease outward as the links find their natural pattern, each ring settling comfortably among the others. A final ridge remains along one edge of the coif. You guide the links outward with a slow motion, allowing the gathered section to loosen. The rings slide apart and come to rest. The pattern lies even now. Thousands of small circles form a flexible sheet of steel beside the other pieces on the bench. The coif rests quiet and balanced across the linen. Mail changes the atmosphere of the bench simply by being there. Plate holds shape. Mail suggests movement even in stillness. The breastplate keeps its curve whether touched or not. The helm remains itself from every angle, but the coif seems always on the verge of becoming something else. A gathered hood, a spread mantle of rings, a narrowing frame around the face, a weighted fall over neck and shoulder. Even at rest, it carries the memory of motion. You let your hand hover above it for a moment before touching again. Under the lamp, the links do not return light in long surfaces. They answer in hundreds of smaller points, most of them faint, each appearing and vanishing as the rings shift into one another. That softer, scattered brightness changes the whole bench. Broad steel looks more solid beside it. Linen looks plainer. Even the gauntlets seem more mechanical in contrast. You lift one edge only slightly and let it fall back again. A small sound follows, not loud, not sharp, only the close whisper of linked rings settling against linked rings. It is a different kind of quiet from plate. Plate gives muted contact when lowered. Mail gives a more continuous hush, as though it is always redistributing itself by the smallest degrees. That, too, belongs to the dissolved quality of the work tonight. Not every piece answers the hand in the same language. Some answer by firmness, some by articulation, some by drape. The mind need not force them into sameness. It can simply move from one material truth to the next. And so the bench becomes more than a place of objects. It becomes a place of textures: smooth steel, padded linen, brushed wood, woven wool, leather, rings, oil, glass, thread. One hand passes among them all. One lamp reveals them. One unhurried night holds the sequence together. For a moment, you stand back and look over the bench. The breastplate lies broad at the center. The helm rests beside it. The gauntlets wait in their paired stillness. The chainmail spreads in a dark, silvery weave beside them. The workbench, empty not long ago, has begun to gather the full shape of the knight's armor, not yet polished, not yet fully prepared, but assembled now into readiness. The The bench holds its gathered stillness for a little while longer. Nothing asks to be touched at once. The breastplate rests broad at the center, firm in its curve. The helm keeps its rounded silence beside it. The gauntlets lie with their narrow fingers extended, each small plate waiting within the next. The coif answers differently, its rings holding shape and softness together, neither rigid nor loose, only ready to fall where they are guided. For a moment, you simply stand there and let the whole arrangement settle into the eye. Each piece has its own manner of waiting. The breastplate waits openly. Its broad front offers itself at once to the hand and the cloth. Its ridge gives direction. Its rivets give measure. Even covered by the day's faint dust, it already feels straightforward in its purpose. The helm waits more quietly. Its shape reveals less all at once. One curve leads into another. The crown gives way to visor. The visor leads toward hinge and rim. Even before the cleaning begins, it asks for closer attention, as though its work must be read in smaller arcs and narrower shadows. The gauntlets wait differently again. Their stillness is full of hidden motion. Even lying flat, they suggest bending, closing, opening. The hand that will one day slip inside them seems almost implied by the way the plates overlap and the finger segments narrow. Nothing in them is broad. Everything is made of small decisions joined together. Then there is the chainmail. Even now, it seems less like an object than a behavior. It does not rest with the same finality as the plate. It settles, shifts by the smallest degree, settles again. Its readiness is not the readiness of fixed shape, but of willing response. Lift one edge and the rest follows. Move one fold and the whole weight redistributes itself in a soft metallic hush. You let your breathing move in that same unhurried way. In, out, no need to hurry toward the next stage. The room does not ask for speed. It only asks that each thing be seen properly before it is touched. The lamp helps with that. Its glow does not flatten the armor. It separates it gently. A broader light across the breastplate, a softer arc over the helm, small scattered glints across the mail, dimmer touches along the gauntlet plates. Even the linen beneath them plays its part, holding a pale quietness between the darker shapes of steel so the eye may rest before moving on. Perhaps that is one reason careful work can feel so calming, not because nothing is happening. A great deal is happening, but because each part is allowed its own pace. Nothing competes, nothing interrupts. The hand can attend to one surface, then another, in the same way water finds its level without effort. You take a slow step along the bench. From this angle, the breastplate changes. The ridge catches a thinner line of brightness now. The broad lower curve falls further into shade. The helm reflects the cloth beneath it in a softened band. One gauntlet shows a faint dullness along the knuckles. The other keeps more shadow between its finger plates. The coif darkens almost to gray-black except where a few rings answer the lamp and then disappear again. This is how the armor first presents itself to the knight's work. Not shining, not neglected, simply lived with, used, returned, waiting again. There is comfort in that too. Nothing here is ceremonial. Nothing has been arranged for admiration alone. Each thing exists for use. For wearing, for fastening, for lifting, for carrying weight, for protecting what is vulnerable beneath it. And yet usefulness does not make it harsh. Under the lamp, usefulness becomes something quieter. The breastplate is no longer only defense. It is a curve of worked steel waiting for cloth. The helm is no longer only enclosure. It is crown, seam, hinge, rim. The gauntlets are no longer only protection for the hand. They are rows of joined plates, each one answering the next. Even the coif, made of so many small rings, becomes less an object of war than a woven fall of metal resting in patient folds. The night has a way of changing things like that. What would feel heavy by day feels measured now. What would seem stern by daylight becomes calm under a small lamp in a stone room while the rest of the castle lies mostly quiet. You let your fingertips rest lightly on the edge of the bench. The oak beneath them feels worn smooth by other evenings like this one, other nights of preparation, other returns to order. The table has known broad plates laid down carefully. Helms turned to catch the light. Cloths folded and unfolded. Brushes lifted. Bottles opened and stoppered again. All those repeated acts remain here not as noise but as familiarity. That familiarity has its own gentleness. The body softens more easily inside a sequence it does not have to question. First, the pieces are gathered, then the dust is lifted, then the polish, then the joints eased, then the garment straightened, then the sword, then everything restored to readiness. Not because another order would be impossible, only because this one has been learned deeply enough that the hands may move through it without strain. And when the hands do not strain, the mind often loosens with them. A room like this can hold that loosening. Stone around it, oak beneath it, steel above it, linen between, one lamp, one long evening, one task divided into many smaller tasks, each simple enough to follow without resistance. You look once more across the bench. All the pieces are here now. All the work still lies ahead. And yet something has already been settled just by gathering them into one place. That is often the first easing, long before the cloth begins its passes across the metal. A thing brought near, a task made visible, a scattered readiness gathered into order. You let that quiet order rest for another breath. Then your hand moves toward the brush. The wooden handle fits easily in your grip, the soft bristles shaped for lifting dust without marking the steel beneath. The brush moves first across the breastplate. Its curved surface lies broad and still on the cloth, and a faint trace of dust runs down the center. The bristles follow that line slowly, clearing the fine layer gathered there. A narrow path of clean steel appears where the brush passes. The motion continues along the seam where small rivets hold the plate together. Dust slips free from the tiny spaces between them. You draw the brush outward across the broader curve of the metal. The bristles travel lightly over the surface, lifting what remains without disturbing the quiet arrangement of the piece upon the cloth. When the brush lifts away, the breastplate rests darker and cleaner on the linen, its surface now clear of the dust that softened it. You raise the brush again and turn toward the helm beside it. The rounded crown catches a soft line of light, its smooth steel surface curving gently toward the narrow opening of the visor. A faint trace of dust lies across the metal where it has settled during the long, quiet hours of the day. The brush moves slowly across the crown. Soft bristles follow the curve of the steel, lifting the thin layer that rests along the surface. As the motion continues, the metal beneath grows clearer, and the reflection of the gentle glow becomes a little brighter where the dust has been carried away. You guide the brush downward toward the front of the helm. The visor edge forms a narrow ridge where the steel meets the opening for the eyes. The bristles pass carefully along that line, clearing the fine dust that gathers in the small seam. A few particles fall away onto the linen below. The motion remains slow and steady. You turn the helm slightly so the light reaches the opposite side of the crown. The brush follows the curve once more, tracing the smooth surface from the top of the helm toward the rim. Where the brush lifts, the steel appears darker and cleaner. The visor remains closed. The narrow slit sits quietly beneath the curve of the crown, while the brush passes gently along the outer edge. The steel there feels smooth and firm, shaped to protect the face while leaving space for sight and breath. The brush moves once more across the crown. With each stroke, the surface becomes clearer, the faint dust now gone from the smooth metal. When the brushing ends, the helm rests beside the breastplate, its curved steel now clean and ready for the careful polishing that will follow. You turn the helm slightly, so the front faces you more clearly. The visor sits closed against the rim, its narrow opening forming a fine horizontal slit across the front. Along the edge where the visor meets the helm, a delicate seam runs in a gentle curve, marking the place where the steel pivots when the visor is raised. The brush returns to the metal. Soft bristles move carefully along that seam, following the line where dust has settled in the narrow space between the two pieces of steel. The motion is slower here, allowing the bristles to pass lightly into the small gap. A faint line of dust lifts away. You guide the brush along the hinge where the visor joins the side of the helm. The small joint rests firmly in place, its rounded pin holding the moving piece securely while allowing the visor to rise and fall when needed. The bristles slip gently around the hinge. Fine dust gathers along the small curves of the joint, but the brush clears it easily with a few careful strokes. As the seam clears, the metal shows its smooth surface once again. You turn the helm a little further. The opposite hinge comes into view along the other side of the visor. The brush follows the same careful path along the edge, clearing the dust gathered in the seam and around the hinge pin. When the brushing ends, the visor seam lies clear along the front of the helm. The steel rests quietly on the linen, the visor closed, and the hinges free of dust, ready for the polishing that will come later in the careful work of the night. You set the brush down for a moment and reach toward the gauntlets resting beside the helm. The articulated gloves lie quietly on the linen, their overlapping plates forming narrow rows that protect the fingers and back of the hand when worn. Each small plate is joined to the next, allowing the gauntlet to bend and move as the hand inside closes or opens. You lift one gauntlet from the cloth. The cuff rests easily in your grip while the finger plates hang downward, the small sections shifting slightly against one another as the weight settles. The steel feels cool and smooth where it has already been cared for before. You turn the gauntlet slowly. The brush rises again and begins its work along the outer plates. Soft bristles pass across the narrow metal surfaces, lifting the fine dust that has gathered in the shallow spaces between the segments. The motion follows the line of the plates from the cuff toward the knuckles, each small section clearing as the brush moves over it. The steel beneath appears darker and cleaner once the dust has been carried away. You guide the brush across the curved knuckle guards. The metal here rises slightly above the rest of the plates, forming a protective ridge across the back of the hand. The bristles pass lightly over the curve before moving onward toward the finger segments. There the work becomes smaller. The brush follows the lines of the finger plates, tracing their narrow length and passing gently over the joints where each segment overlaps the next. Dust lifts from the small recesses and falls away onto the linen below. You turn the gauntlet slightly in your hand so the brush can pass along the outer edge. The final strokes move across the last of the finger plates before the brush lifts away. For a moment, you hold the gauntlet still. The rows of overlapping steel now lie clear of dust, the joints and ridges showing more cleanly in the lamp's glow. Then you lower it once more onto the linen beside its pair. The plates settle into quiet alignment, ready for the polishing that will follow. You lift the second gauntlet from the linen. The articulated plates shift softly as the weight settles, each small section sliding slightly against the next. The cuff rests easily in your grip, while the finger segments hang downward in a quiet line of overlapping steel. You turn the gauntlet so the back of the hand faces upward. The brush begins its slow work across the outer plates once more. Soft bristles move along the narrow surfaces, lifting the faint dust gathered between the joints where the metal sections meet. The motion continues from the cuff toward the knuckles. Each plate clears as the brush passes over it, and the steel beneath appears darker and smoother once the fine dust has been carried away. You guide the brush carefully along the finger plates. The small segments bend easily when touched, each joint shaped to move with the hand that will wear it. The bristles pass between the narrow gaps, clearing the dust that rests along the edges of the tiny hinges. The gauntlet turns slightly as the brushing continues. The final strokes pass along the outer edge of the finger plates before the brush lifts away. You lower the gauntlet gently beside the first. Both pieces now lie together on the linen, their articulated plates clean and still, ready for the quieter work of polishing that will soon follow. The brush rests for a moment on the linen. You pause beside the workbench and look over the pieces now gathered there. At the center lies the breastplate, its broad curve catching the soft glow along the ridge that runs from top to bottom. The steel appears clearer now where the brush has passed across it, the faint dust of the day already lifted away. Beside it rests the helm. Its rounded crown curves gently toward the visor, the narrow slit forming a quiet line across the front. The hinges along the sides sit clean and still after the careful brushing that cleared the seams. Your attention moves slightly along the cloth. The gauntlets lie together nearby, their overlapping plates arranged in narrow rows like folded metal leaves. Each small segment rests lightly against the next, forming the flexible armor that will move with the knight's hands when worn. Beyond them, the chainmail spreads across the linen. Thousands of small rings form the woven mesh of the coif, the links resting in a wide layer of interlocking circles. Where the light touches them, faint reflections appear and fade again as the rings settle. For a moment, everything remains still. The workbench now holds nearly all the pieces needed for the armor. Steel plates, articulated gloves, the hood of chainmail. Each part rests quietly on the linen, prepared for the careful polishing that will soon begin. You remain there briefly, letting the quiet order of the armor settle before reaching again for the cloth that will begin the next stage of the work. Polishing asks for a different tempo from brushing. Brushing is a lifting away, dust loosened, edges cleared, surfaces revealed. Polishing asks for staying, not merely touching the metal and moving on, but remaining with it long enough for the cloth to draw a response from the steel. The motion must be slower, more even. It cannot hurry past the curve of a helm or skip too quickly over the rise of a breastplate ridge. Polishing asks for a steadier hand than brushing, not because it is mysterious. It shows in streaks, missed dullness, uneven sheen, and cloth marks left where the hand lost patience. You lift the heavier cloth and feel that difference before it even touches the armor. Its weave is denser than the brushing cloth. The fold sits thicker in your hand. When you compress it slightly between your fingers, it keeps more of its body. It is made not to flick dust free, but to travel in broader, steadier passes across metal that is already clean enough to receive it. For a moment you hold it there, not yet setting it down. The lamp gives the fabric its own subdued glow. Its edges are softer than the sharp profile of the steel nearby. The cloth belongs to a different world from the armor. Plant fiber, woven thread, fold and pressure against forged plate, rivet, hinge, tempered edge. Yet the entire night depends on the meeting of those unlike things. Linen against steel, softness drawing clarity out of hardness. That contrast carries a quiet satisfaction of its own. You unfold the cloth more fully, and let it breathe in your hands before shaping it again into the thicker pad that polishing requires. Corners align, layers overlap. One side is drawn inward. The surface becomes cushioned but controlled, broad enough to travel smoothly, compact enough to keep pressure where it is needed. While you do this, your gaze rests once more on the armor spread across the bench. The breastplate will take the cloth first. It is the natural beginning. Its surface is wide enough to establish the rhythm of the hand. Long strokes can be made there. Curves can be followed. Light can be watched changing as the sheen deepens. After that, the smaller complexities of the helm and gauntlets will feel easier to enter because the movement will already be settled into the wrist and shoulder. That too is part of good order. Start broad, then move finer. There is no need to think of the entire remaining sequence all at once, only the next contact, the next pass, the next section of steel receiving the cloth. You let the folded pad hover briefly above the breastplate before bringing it down. The metal beneath still carries the slightly muted look that remains after brushing. Clean, but not yet fully woken. A surface waiting to be brought back into conversation with light, and that is perhaps the deepest quality of polishing. It is less about shine than about response. A dull surface keeps light at a distance. A polished one answers it, not necessarily with brilliance. Sometimes only with a more coherent return, a steadier reflection, a cleaner reading of shape. That is enough. As your breathing continues, the work can begin to take on that same answering quality. Nothing forced, nothing performed, only one calm motion meeting another. Cloth to steel, hand to cloth, light to surface, breath to task. Once the first stroke begins, the mind often has less reason to hold itself so tightly. Repetition does some of the carrying. The hand learns the width of the curve. The wrist learns how much pressure the cloth should keep. The eye learns how much change to expect after one pass and after two. Soon the task itself begins to lead, and thinking may loosen a little behind it. That dissolved quality belongs especially to nights like this, when there is time enough for the work to unfold without interruption. No hurried caller at the door. No sudden need elsewhere in the castle. No demand that the valet leave one piece half-tended to rush toward another obligation. Only the bench, the lamp, the cloth, and the long, patient sequence of preparation. You can feel that length ahead now. Breastplate, helm, joints, mail, garments, sword, reassembly, order restored. But those are only distant shapes for the moment. Right now, the cloth rests in your hand and the breastplate waits. The room remains composed around that one fact. At the wall, the hooks still hold what has already been returned or what has not yet been needed. At the bench edge, the bottle stands closed and ready. The brush lies set down after its earlier work. The coif catches light in many smaller scattered points, while the plate at center offers one broad field across which the polish may begin to move. Your hand descends, the cloth meets the steel, and the next stage of the night opens. You lift the folded cloth and bring it toward the breastplate. The curved steel lies broad and still at the center of the linen. Its surface already appears cleaner after the brushing, though the metal still carries the faint softness that remains before polishing. The cloth settles against the upper curve of the plate. You begin to draw it slowly across the steel. The folded layers move smoothly along the surface, following the gentle curve of the breastplate. The motion is steady and unhurried, allowing the fabric to glide across the metal without catching. As the cloth travels across the plate, the steel beneath grows clearer. The soft friction of linen against metal lifts the last faint dullness left after brushing. Where the cloth passes, the surface begins to hold a deeper reflection of the quiet glow above the bench. You guide the cloth downward along the center of the plate. The raised ridge runs from the upper edge toward the lower curve, forming the strongest line of the armor. The cloth follows that ridge carefully, the folded pad slipping along the steel with a smooth, even motion. When the cloth reaches the lower curve, the motion pauses. You lift the fabric and return it once more to the top of the breastplate. Again, the cloth travels slowly across the steel. The repeated motion deepens the clarity of the surface. the metal gradually revealing its clean, smooth finish as the cloth moves across it. When the stroke ends, the breastplate remains at the center of the linen. Its curved surface now reflects the quiet glow more clearly than before, ready for the more careful attention that will follow along the ridge and rivets. You return the cloth to the breastplate once more. This time the motion follows the raised ridge that runs down the center of the plate. The line rises gently above the surrounding steel, guiding the path of the cloth as it moves along the length of the armor. The fabric travels slowly along that ridge. Small rivets sit on either side, each one holding the shaped metal firmly in place. The folded cloth slips between them with careful pressure, the woven linen clearing the faint traces that remain along the narrow seams. The motion continues downward. The ridge narrows slightly as it approaches the lower curve of the breastplate. The cloth follows the change in shape, gliding along the steel while the rivets pass quietly beneath the folded layers. When the cloth lifts away, the ridge appears clean and defined. You turn the breastplate slightly on the linen. The steel shifts just enough to allow the cloth to pass along the opposite side of the ridge. Again, the fabric moves slowly across the rivet line, clearing the fine spaces between the small metal heads. The folded linen moves once more toward the lower edge of the plate. When the final stroke ends, the breastplate settles quietly at the center of the bench. The ridge now runs clear from top to bottom, the rivets resting clean along the seam, while the polished steel reflects the soft glow more brightly than before. You lift the folded linen once more and turn toward the helm resting beside the breastplate. Its rounded crown rises gently from the cloth, the curved steel holding a softer line of light than the broad front of the plate beside it. Brushing has already cleared away the dust. What remains now is the quieter work of bringing the surface back into its full finish. The linen settles against the crown. You begin to draw it slowly across the metal. The folded pad follows the rise of the helm from the upper curve toward one side, moving in an even, unbroken pass. The cloth does not travel quickly here. A helm asks to be followed, not crossed. Its shape turns away from the hand almost as soon as the hand arrives, and so each stroke must listen to the curve as much as guide it. Where the cloth passes, the metal grows clearer, not brighter all at once, more responsive. The lamp glow gathers more coherently along the steel, the reflection no longer softened by the faint haze that remained after brushing. You lift the cloth and return it to the crown again. A second pass follows the first. Then another, each one overlapping slightly, the linen gliding from top toward rim, from front toward side, until the whole upper curve has been tended once, then twice, then a little more where the light still asks for it. The helm turns slightly beneath your hands. Now the opposite side comes into view, and the same slow work begins there. The folded cloth follows the descending arc toward the cheek, then back toward the crown, then downward again in a narrower pass that traces the change of angle where the rounded top begins to become front. Small changes accumulate. The steel no longer holds the light in broken softness. It begins to return it in longer, steadier bands. You pause just long enough to see that change. Then your attention moves toward the visor. You remain with the crown a little longer before moving lower. There is a particular quality to polishing a curved surface that flat work does not have. A breastplate offers direction. The cloth travels along the ridge, follows the sweep outward, returns. The movement is purposeful and legible. The helm offers something different. Its curves turn away from the hand almost continuously. No single stroke can follow the whole surface in one motion. The cloth must travel a short distance, then be lifted, then placed again at a slightly different angle, then drawn across another portion of the curve. That repeated repositioning asks for a different kind of attention. not more effort, only more patience with incompleteness. Each pass covers its portion and no more. The next pass begins from somewhere nearby and covers its portion. The polish builds through accumulation rather than sweep, and the surface only reveals its full response when enough of those small motions have been made in enough overlapping directions. You work the cloth around the back of the helm now. This part catches the lamplight last and most obliquely. Its surface is no different in material from the crown, yet it holds a quieter sheen, as though the steel here has had less reason over the years to be noticed. The cloth moves across it with the same care given to the front. The metal answers in the same way. Gradually, the back of the helm becomes as clear as the parts more often seen. That matters, not because anyone will look there when the armor is worn, only because the work knows no part of it better or worse than another. A piece prepared well is prepared all the way around. You lower the cloth once more and make a final broad pass across the crown, this time not following any particular line, but allowing the fabric to travel wherever the surface asks it. The motion settles into something more intuitive, the hand following the steel rather than directing it. Where the cloth presses more naturally, it stays a breath longer. Where it wants to move on, it moves. When it lifts away, the helm catches the lamp glow in a steadier arc than before. Not bright, only clear. The full curve of the crown now holds one coherent response to the light above it, without the duller patches that remained after brushing. That coherence is what the cloth was looking for all along. The narrow slit sits beneath the curve of the crown, a fine, dark line against the clearer surface. Along the edge where visor meets helm, the seam runs in a gentle arc from one hinge toward the other. Earlier brushing cleared the dust from this join. Now the linen follows it more slowly. You fold the cloth tighter at one corner and set that narrower edge against the seam. The fabric passes along it with measured care, tracing the line where moving steel rests against still steel. No force is needed, only steadiness. The linen clears the faint remaining dullness from the ridge and leaves the metal smoother to the eye. From there, the cloth travels toward the first hinge. The joint is small, rounded, practical. It is not meant to draw attention to itself, only to work. Yet under the lamp, with the cloth moving around it, its shape becomes briefly more visible. Pin, curve, join, rim. Your hand circles it gently, letting the linen touch each part without catching. The helm is turned again. The opposite hinge comes into view. The same motion follows there. Slow, close, careful around the pin and along the seam where the visor would rise if opened fully. For a moment, you rest the cloth and look. The crown has regained its even finish. The visor line reads more cleanly. Both hinges sit more clearly within the whole shape rather than seeming lost in shadow and dust. Only then do you reach for the bottle of oil. It rests where it was placed earlier, narrow-necked and quiet. When you lift it, the dark liquid inside shifts softly and then settles again. The stopper comes free with a small movement. A faint scent rises from the opening, clean and familiar. You fold the tip of the linen more tightly. That narrow edge touches the bottle's mouth just enough to take on a trace of oil. No more than that is needed. Then the cloth returns to the hinge. The oiled edge touches the joint lightly. A small motion carries the liquid around the curve of the pin and into the narrow meeting place of the metal parts. Nothing drips, nothing pools. The quantity is slight, but sufficient. You raise the visor a fraction. The hinge turns with a quiet, controlled movement, just enough for the oil to travel more deeply along the pin before the metal returns to rest. The cloth follows once more, this time clearing the excess from the outer surface, so only the thinnest layer remains where it is useful. Then the second hinge receives the same attention. A trace of oil, a slow pass around the pin, a slight lift, a return, a clearing away of any excess. When both joints have been tended, the helm remains still upon the linen. For a breath or two, you do nothing more. The oil has already gone where it needed to go. Any further touching now would only disturb what has been properly set in order. So your hand rests lightly on the cloth while your eyes remain on the helm. This pause matters. Not every part of good work is motion. Sometimes the clearest way to know whether something has been well tended is to stop long enough to let it be still. The visor remains closed. The seam lies narrow and even along the front. At either side, the hinges no longer hold the dry look of untouched joints. They sit with a subtler finish now, neither wet nor dull, only cared for. You lift the visor once more by the smallest degree. It rises. It returns. Nothing catches. Nothing resists. That one slight motion is enough to confirm what the eye already suspected. You let the helm rest again and feel a small inward easing that has nothing to do with pride and everything to do with function. A hinge is a humble thing compared with a crown of steel or the broad front of a breastplate. Yet if it fails, the greater shape around it matters less. Small workings support larger certainties. Quiet care protects larger readiness. Perhaps that is true in more places than an armory. Still, there is no need to follow the thought very far. This room asks less for meaning than for attention. Meaning may come or not come. The work remains. You lower your gaze from the visor line to the cloth beside it, to the bottle, to the folded edge of linen in your hand. Then the pause is complete. The helm has had what it needed. The night can move onward. Its crown is polished. Its visor seam lies clear. Its hinges hold the quiet readiness that belongs to well-kept moving parts. You set the bottle down again nearby, stopper resting beside it for the moment, and let your eyes rest on the helm before moving onward. It is always striking, in a room like this, how much of the work happens in places hardly visible once the armor is worn. A hinge, a seam, a narrow slit, the backside of a rivet line. All these hidden practicalities, all this care given to what must function more than what must be admired. Perhaps that is why the work has such a calming effect. It is honest. It does not pretend that appearance alone is enough. Shine matters, yes, but smooth movement matters too. Clarity matters. Readiness matters. A polished visor that sticks at the hinge would not be well prepared, no matter how handsome its surface looked beneath the morning sun. Now, at least, this helm is properly tended in both ways. Your attention can move on. The gauntlets wait nearby, their many smaller joints asking for the same kind of care, only repeated more finely and at greater number. You turn toward them and begin. You lift the first gauntlet once more from the linen. Its weight settles into your hand in a very different way from the helm. A helm gathers itself into one enclosing shape. A gauntlet is made of many smaller intentions: cuff, hand guard, knuckle plates, finger segments, narrow hinges between them all. When held still, it seems compact. When the hand turns it slightly, those joined pieces reveal how much movement has been built into so little space. The folded linen already carries the faint trace of oil from the helm hinges. You touch the cloth lightly to the bottle again, taking up only a little more. Then the fabric moves toward the first joint near the cuff. The oil settles along the narrow seam where one plate overlaps the next. Your thumb supports the inside while the cloth follows the outer line, allowing the liquid to reach the hidden parts of the hinge without leaving any excess on the visible surface. You bend the cuff slightly. The plates shift with a muted metallic motion, then return. That is enough. The joint has taken what it needs. From there, your attention moves to the hand guard. Small articulated sections lie one beyond another, each made to travel with the hand when it closes around a rein, a strap, or a sword hilt. The cloth follows the first hinge, then the next. then the narrower ones that begin at the base of the fingers. Each joint asks for the same thing and also its own variation. One sits openly enough to be reached in a single pass. Another is half hidden beneath an overlapping plate and requires the cloth to be folded tighter and guided more carefully into the space. You do not hurry any of them. The hand turns the gauntlet when needed. The cloth touches the bottle again only when the trace of oil has nearly vanished. The metal opens a little under your thumb and settles again. By the time you reach the fingers, the work has become very fine indeed. The segments are small, their hinges are smaller still, yet even here the movement remains calm. A little oil, a small pass, a slight bend, a return, one finger after another from the knuckle plates toward the tips. When the last joint has been tended, you hold the gauntlet for a breath longer, letting your eye move once from cuff to fingertip. Then you lower it gently back to the linen. Its pair waits beside it. You lift that one next, and the same order begins again. Not identical, familiar but not mechanical. The second gauntlet carries its own tiny differences of wear. One hinge takes the cloth easily. Another asks for a second pass. A knuckle plate catches the light more strongly on this side. The outer edge of the little finger needs a slower angle of approach. Such variations keep the task from becoming dull. Repetition, yes, but repetition with notice. Once the second gauntlet has been oiled and returned to the cloth, both lie side by side again, their rows of plates aligned, their finger joints freed for smooth movement. Now your gaze moves toward the coif. Chainmail asks for another kind of care altogether. It has no broad surface to polish and no small hinge pins to oil. Its strength lies in linked repetition, ring answering ring across the whole draped weave. The earlier brushing lifted what dust had settled into it. What remains now is the quiet settling of the mail into its proper shape. You slide your hands beneath one side and raise it. The links travel over one another with a softened metallic whisper. The lifted edge hangs in a curved fall from your fingers, then slips back onto the linen when you lower it. You gather another section, this time near the opening that will frame the face when worn. The rings there are denser in feeling because the shape narrows before widening again over neck and shoulders. You ease a folded part outward. The circles separate, then rest more evenly. A little farther down, the mail has bunched where its weight settled against the edge of a gauntlet earlier. You lift that area and let it slide free of itself. The pattern opens. The silvery darkness of the woven rings becomes more even beneath the lamp. You do this several times in different places, not trying to transform the coif into anything rigid, only helping it find its natural fall. That is enough. Mail does not need flattening in the way cloth does. It needs easing. It needs room to drape according to its own nature. When you are satisfied, the coif lies spread more clearly beside the other pieces, the face opening visible, the lower sweep broadened across the linen in a settled dark shimmer of interlocked rings. Only then does your attention move from steel to cloth. At the far side of the bench, the gambeson waits folded. You lift it carefully and bring it to the cleared portion of the work surface. The padded garment has a steadier, softer weight than armor. Its stitched channels hold the filling in long ordered rows, and when you lower it onto the bench, those rows guide the fabric naturally into shape. You draw out one sleeve, then the other. The front panels are opened and laid smooth. Your hands pass over the padded surface, easing folds away from the chest and shoulder lines. The collar is straightened. The body of the garment settles into place. Next comes the shirt. Compared with the gambeson, it feels light and cool. Fine linen yields quickly when unfolded. Sleeves lengthen across the bench with little effort. The front opens. The collar falls into a neater line beneath your hand. When you spread it across the gambeson, the contrast between the two fabrics is immediately clear. One padded and substantial, the other light, close, and breathable. They belong together. One cushions, one separates, one bears weight, one eases the body beneath it, then the cloak. Its wool carries a slower gravity than either of the other garments. When lifted, it opens reluctantly at first, then more fully as its breadth reveals itself. You lay it over the prepared layers and smooth the heavier folds outward. One shoulder line is adjusted, then the other. The collar is placed where it should sit. The fuller drape settles over gambeson, and shirt alike, dark wool against paler linen, warmth above padding above light cloth. The garments now lie in their proper order, each ready to receive the armor that belongs above it. From there, your gaze shifts toward the sword belt and scabbard. The belt is loosened first, the buckle turned outward, the leather drawn into a straighter line across the bench. The scabbard is brought nearer the center. Its surface bears the small signs of use. Softened places where a hand most often lifts it, a slight polish along one edge from contact against clothing, and armor, stitching kept sound by regular care. You draw the sword slowly free. The blade comes out in a long, controlled movement until the full length rests above the linen. Under the lamp, it answers light differently from armor. Plate returns glow in broad curves. A sword returns it in a thinner, straighter language. Line, edge, fuller, tip. The folded cloth touches the blade below the guard and moves steadily toward the middle. A faint trace from the sheath is lifted away. You return to the base and make another pass, then another farther along. The metal grows clearer under the cloth, not made flashy, only properly brightened. When the whole length has been tended, you hold it still for a moment, seeing the steadier line of light it now carries. Then the sword is returned to the scabbard. The steel slides back with a quiet, measured sound until guard meets leather once more. You remain there for a moment with the scabbard in your hands. A sword is a different kind of object from armor. Armor is made to be worn, and its purpose is inseparable from the body it protects. Even resting on its stand, a breastplate keeps the shape of the chest it covers. A helm retains the enclosing form that will surround the head. They are, in their stillness, already partly occupied. A sword is different. It rests complete in itself. Its geometry is its own, not borrowed from any body. The straight line from guard to tip belongs to the blade, not to the hand that holds it. The grip has been worn into its shape by use, yes, but the weapon itself remains indifferent to whether it is held or not. It simply is what it is, balanced, finished, precise. That self-sufficiency gives it a different quality on the bench. You lift it once more, only partway free of the scabbard, enough to see where the metal begins its taper toward the fuller. The fuller runs along the flat of the blade, a shallow groove that reduces weight without reducing strength. Polishing cloth passes over it differently from the ridged surfaces of plate armor. There is no raised line to follow here, only a gentle depression, a channel in the steel that the cloth must press lightly into rather than skim across. You draw the fabric along it once. The fuller catches more oil than the flat surface beside it. Your finger traces the cloth through the groove, applying slight extra pressure to reach the lower edges of the channel before the fabric passes on. The blade here is at its most even. No rivet interrupts the line. No hinge requires a change of approach. Only steel and its own geometry, the fuller running clean from guard toward the point. You fold the cloth and make one final pass along the opposite face. Then the sword returns fully to the scabbard. The sound is not entirely silent. A blade re-entering leather carries its own particular hush. Not the metallic whisper of chainmail, not the muted contact of plate on linen, but something between them. A fine, sustained note, brief, and then gone. The guard rests against the throat of the scabbard. The sword is ready. Whatever the morning requires of it belongs to the morning. Tonight it has received what this careful room can give. Now the room has reached its last sequence, reassembly. You lift the gambeson first and carry it to the stand. It settles there as the soft underlayer, sleeves falling naturally, body hanging straight. The shirt follows over it, then the cloak arranged so it may be taken up easily when the time comes. Next comes the breastplate. You lift it from the linen and bring it forward with both hands. The polished curve catches the lamp glow one last time on the bench before it settles into place over the padded garment. Its weight belongs there now, no longer in preparation, but in readiness. You remain beside the stand for a moment before reaching for the helm. The breastplate changes the stand the way the first piece on the bench changed the bench earlier in the evening. An empty stand is only a frame. A stand with the breastplate upon it has become the beginning of a night. Not a night yet, only the beginning of one. The gambeson hangs beneath, giving the steel something to rest against that remembers the body it will cover. The breastplate above it carries the curve that will sit against the chest. Together they hold a posture, though no body inhabits them. An angle of the shoulders, the particular forward set of a figure dressed for serious purpose. Looking at that partial arrangement, something of the whole evening becomes visible. Every piece you lifted from its stand tonight, every surface you drew the cloth across, every hinge you oiled, and every fold you smoothed was done in service of this moment. An armor stand that will meet the knight's hands in the dark hours before dawn, when the preparation of the night becomes the readiness of the morning. That passing of care from one pair of hands to another is quiet and unhurried. The knight will not know what dust was lifted from the visor seam, which gauntlet joint took a second pass of oil, where the fuller of the sword received its final cloth. None of that will be visible in the lamplight rush of arming. The work will only be felt as things moving as they should. Buckles yielding at their natural speed, steel sitting without catching or grinding, fabric lying smooth where it needs to lie smooth. The valet's work disappears into readiness. That is its nature. That is, perhaps, its particular virtue. You allow yourself only this one still moment before the helm is lifted and placed. Then your hands return to the task. The helm follows, then the gauntlets, then the coif, placed where it may be taken up without confusion. Nearby, the sword belt and scabbard are left arranged for easy reach. When all is set in place, you return to the bench. The cloth used for polishing is folded again. The softer brush is lifted and carried back to its hook. The oil bottle is stoppered and returned to its place. Your hands smooth the linen covering the table, then lift and refold it if that is your custom here, or else leave it spread if morning will require it soon. However it remains, the bench is no longer busy with the motions of the work. It has given them and is calm again. Only then do you step back and look. And that stillness feels different now from the stillness that greeted you at the beginning. Earlier, the room was waiting. Now it is settled. That difference is slight, yet unmistakable. At the start of the night, each object seemed suspended before use. Steel on stands, cloth folded, tools on hooks, lamp not yet fully placed, bench not yet given its task. Silence then had the quality of pause. Now silence has the quality of completion. The stands no longer merely hold armor, they hold prepared armor. The bench no longer merely offers space. It has received the whole sequence of the work and been cleared again. Even the lamp, dimmed now, seems to rest more deeply within the room, as though its share in the night has also been fulfilled. You let your gaze move slowly through that settled order. The gambeson hangs straight beneath the breastplate, its padded structure no longer folded on the bench, but ready to meet the body it was made to support. The helm rests above, crown forward, visor closed, its hinges eased for smooth motion. Gauntlets wait beside it, their smaller plates aligned, their joints no longer dry from stillness. Nearby, the sword remains in its sheath, belt arranged so it may be taken up without fumbling in the colder hour before dawn. One final look moves over everything before the lamp is lowered further. Not to inspect now. Inspection is past, only to let the eye travel through the completed order and recognize it as finished. From the stand downward, helm, breastplate, gambeson beneath. To one side, gauntlets, coif, belt. Nearby, the sword resting in its sheath. Behind, the bench restored to calm. Beyond that, the wall with its hooks, each tool returned where the hand will find it next time without searching. The room no longer contains separate tasks. It contains one completed sequence. Even the air feels a little altered by that, not warmer, not brighter, only more settled. The kind of stillness that comes after useful movement has passed through a space and left nothing unsettled behind. A person might spend a whole life underestimating the relief of such moments. No applause, no witness, no announcement. Only the private ease of knowing that what was yours to tend has been tended. That is enough. The castle outside may hold larger concerns. Morning may bring noise, command, obligation, armor buckled in haste, boots on stone, voices in courtyards, leather pulled tight, steel lifted into daylight. But none of that belongs to this moment. This moment belongs only to completion and the quiet that follows it. Then your attention returns once more to the lamp. The glass is warm where your fingers near it. The flame within has already been lowered, though it still gives enough light for one final look across the armor stand. A soft line touches the ridge of the breastplate, then the lower curve of the helm, then the belt lying beside the sword before fading into the surrounding dimness. Nothing more is needed now. Steel prepared, leather ordered, garments laid ready, tools returned. You turn toward the lamp. The flame lowers a little further. The last glow softens across the stand, across the bench, across the quiet stone beyond. Shapes lose their edges. Steel becomes only outline. Wood becomes shadow. Cloth becomes stillness. And the armory settles once more into the deep, unbroken calm of the castle night.